Well, hello everyone, and thank you for coming back to yet another episode of Gloving Table Talks. Joining with me, as always, is one of my co-hosts, McKinnley, aka StarStream. Always glad to have him back. But we also have two new people on for our show today. First off, I want to introduce probably one of the most interesting characters that we've had in the gloving community in recent times. He does a lot of work behind the scenes with You Got Moves a few times for different events, whether that was GFC and G3 Battlegrounds and also original G3. Scotty, aka Sike. How's it going?
What up? Pretty good. Just chilling. Excited to finally be on here. I've been wanting to for a while. The last time I fucking mixed up dates, couldn't make it, but we here now.
Yes, no, I'm very, very excited, especially with today's episode. But of course, also joining Scotty is somebody who, if you have not delved into color theory within the gloving community, and if you do a quick Google search or a Glover's Lounge search, you're going to see this person's name show up a lot because he's pretty much the resident gloving color theorist, and he goes by the name Tajin. So Tajin, how are you?
I am well. Glad to be here. Looking forward to the discussion today.
Yes, so do not hold you guys any longer. We're going to delve right into it, but the subject that we're going to be talking about is programming theory. And to anyone who's been a long time watcher / listener to my channel and my content, you guys know I talk about programming theory a lot because it is a major aspect about gloving that to a lot of newcomers might not even think really has a lot of credibility or has any significant impact on your light show and overall performance. But I'd like to beg differ on that because it's the minutiae of details that do exemplify each other to bring a cacophony of presentation. And that's where programming theory comes into play. So I think the best place to start off is probably one of the simplest ones, and that would be color theory. So I guess the first thing we probably should cover is what is color theory. Is there anyone who wants to take that, or?
I mean, if you want like a textbook definition, I can probably do one because color theory and then gloving color theory is like two very different subjects.
Okay, well, I think maybe that's what we should do is to explain traditional color theory and then how does gloving have its own form of it.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, I'm a coder now, so I'm a software engineer currently. So I have a more deeper understanding of what makes the difference here. So it's essentially, when we think of traditional color theory, we're thinking of things like primary colors, tertiary colors, monologous, analogous, things of those natures were just pretty standard for the most part. So for example, what works really well together and what makes the most visually appealing set of colors in one general use case. So for example, if you were let's say a home designer and someone wants XYZ colors, you can then come in and provide insight on which colors would work together. And to me, that's how traditional color theory is currently used. And what makes it really different for gloving in this case is not only do we have that color theory aspect, but we also have the flashing pattern aspect, which changes a lot for us. Not only do we have the flashing pattern aspect, but now we also have things like motion control, which affects the way we blend and use our color sets as well. So I think there's a very big distinction there with the way we utilize it as glovers, as artists. So to me, they're two different things.
Okay, I can see where that makes sense.
Especially with the limitations and whatnot, because I know, you can't really show certain colors physically or on a computer and whatnot. You can, you're not limited by that. So theories are more vastly different.
I mean, yeah. if you really want theory, my theory is the color red I see is different from the color red you see.
I know exactly the theory you're talking about, and I agree on those theories. I think that, because no matter what, contrast is just existing, between all colors. So you're going to know something's going to have that in that world. Even though my blue could be your red and vice versa, or whatever it could be. It's like the patterns of colors still exist.
Yeah.
One limitation we have too is like we don't get to use black ever in light shows, which sucks because I love using black for like color theory. But It pops up in any time you're using like light. Like I started doing laser production, and again, we don't get black, we only get light. So, but with that, at least, there's times like if you go to a concert where they'll black the screen out, and then there's only lasers or only lights, and so they can kind of work in black. But the only way we can work in black is with blackouts. But I'm sure we all know kind of how that goes.
Well, I mean, this goes back to what I was saying earlier when we're considering like traditional color theory, which can utilize black, because black in clubbing color theory is essentially our blank, which is just the absence of color, and we can't really utilize like a black light per se or like have a dark hole effect. It would just primarily look like a purple at most.
Right.
Yeah.
And when we use a blank, it kind of, depending on how dark the room is, you're essentially making it white because they just see glove. So.
Yeah, it's artificially created.
It's kind of like the reverse, like kind of like how real colors is in gloving.
Yeah.
Whether black is the white and vice versa. It's the absence of color, the absence of the thing.
Yeah. So I've gone over like different forms of color theory that's out there. You know, you got the traditional color theory, you got additive color theory, you have subtractive color theory, which that's where more of like your printing inks come into play is when they use subtractive. But there is a method I feel like gloving is actually able to adopt from all three of these. Now, granted, like the most easiest one to apply to is additive color theory because that involves color theory with light. The thing I always explain to people is that even though, yes, we're dealing with light, the modality that each of these forms of theories have, there's a through line that can be easily conveyed to your viewer, even if they don't know what that color theory is. They will be able to recognize it once you actually really point it out and break it down for them. But they're going to pick up on it even if they're not necessarily aware of that theory, if that makes any sense. And that's something that I feel like gloving really has built itself upon and is really explored. I mean, Tajin, you're the one that came up with pretty much like the color theory Pokédex, essentially.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of personal like backstory of how that really happened. So my first exposure to programming lights was actually with the Micromax IMAXs, and then immediately right after it was chromas, and then tint control was a highlighted feature in the chromas, and I felt like no one was really like utilizing it. And at the time I was still like in high school, so to me it was just like, dude, this is crazy. I can hide colors and then change my idle tint, which I think for the most part is very important to like really, really old heads where like the idle tint matters. Like you don't want like an ugly looking hamburger tint is the point phrase we have currently, or like a salmon tint. Like those are not visually appealing, and you can tell like the harmony of those colors just don't work together on a glove set, but they might work way better in a traditional setting compared to our environment. So essentially that's kind of how I got started. And then the way I was posting and creating them was I would just look at an image, try to identify as many colors that I can correlate to my color palette, and then based on the volume that I can see is how I would determine the saturation. So in this case, this would be the low tint, the mid tint, and the high tint. So that's kind of how I got started, and that's kind of how I approached the groundwork for what exists today.
Oh yeah.
What, like you said, one of the most important things is the tint control, which was like the big shift that the chromas brought into play, was just how tint control works. And how they demonstrated it was very simple, especially for somebody as an old head like me. They gave you the exact same three colors between both sets, but how they had the brightness set up showed you the different idle tints. So you can have a blue tint RGB bulb, or you can have a pink tint RGB bulb just by changing red from low to high and blue from high to low. Like, you're able to just do a simple change like that, and you're able to have a completely different looking color set. When it comes to adding colors onto a single color set, I have come to the realization that if you don't necessarily have like a good theme or kind of like understanding of like, I don't want to say complementary colors, but like color adjacent type deals, where it's like you have light blue but darker blues, you know, and understanding that if you just put a bunch of random colors together, it's actually not going to be very appealing in terms of gloving.
Like in between having like a theme versus like a cool or summer color set versus having something that had natural contrasts.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen a lot of like 7-color strobe bulbs from back in the day that on their Idle, they just look, you know, kind of like this weird grayish bland white color. But there was just so much color that I felt like people just weren't able to read all the colors they were able to demonstrate. And I think what gloving as a community was able to do was essentially learn how to separate the colors and put them on each fingers. So there's actually a dynamic of your color placement on which fingers and how that's actually going to play out with your movements, right? And I think that's why we see these different color sets where it's like maybe your insides are one color and the outsides are a different color, or you have your index and rings being one color as your middles and pinkies are another color. These color patterns that we establish actually play a bigger role of how it stands out to the viewer.
Yeah, years ago I tried to coin that phrase as an archetype. So your glove set's archetype is what you kind of explained. Like for my index and my ring are a set, and then my middle and pinky are a set. I consider those to be like stylistic archetypes. So for example, if I wanted my index and pinky to be the same and my middle and ring to be different, that would be a different archetype. Or something I've noticed with really, really highly technical glovers is sometimes they'll have their glove sets in a pyramid pattern. So it would be like your pinky and your thumbs are one, and then your left hand's ring and index is one, and then your right hand's index is one, and then the rest would be a third, and then that you can do like a cluster pyramid with your color theory. I've seen those like archetypes being created, and for the most part, generally, I think nowadays everyone's just like, I'm just gonna have the same set on all my fingers, and we're gonna rock and roll. So, I think the approach to those archetypes has changed like very drastically compared to what it was back in the day.
Yeah, I played around with
You also have like flipping around the light, right? And what those also provide. And then like the vortex, in my eyes, creates a whole new kind of glover, you know?
Yeah.
For the way they approach their programming and so on and so forth as the technology advances. We're just making new glovers, and they didn't have that challenge, at least for when we started, right? Some people got their first glove set with only 8 lights. They didn't know the thumbs were a thing yet. Or, you know,
really?
And my first set was 8 lights. You had to pay extra to get thumbs.
You got scammed, brother.
No, that was from Amazing. And that was at the store at West Covina for my Trinities.
Damn.
Yeah.
Okay, now you definitely got scammed. Trinities? I'm pretty sure those came in sets of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can purchase them in sets of 10. But
you can. You had to pay extra to get thumbs.
It was a much more common thing for them to sell them in sets of 8s as well, because people, even if they weren't as well versed as being an impactor, the Nova lights were very, very popular still. And so they would never repurchase those. They would always just reuse those from set to set. But they would always buy a new set of finger lights for themselves. So that's where that actually comes from.
When you're a kid who's like 14 and doesn't know anything in Texas, I didn't know anything about what the thumbs were at the time. That was a mystery to me. I was always like, what thumbs are there? And then I kind of like stopped from the Trinity, because I started with the E dots, then I went to the Trinities, and then I stopped buying sets all the way until Chroma Controls. I just used that for a long time, just Trinities.
I played around with this one like archetype where I would have if I had my fingers like this, where these are like dialed, this side was all one set and this side was all one set, and so I would like kind of come up like this and then do that, and it kind of blew a couple people's minds because they thought I came in like this and then did like a crazy like all the way around dial like that. But for the most part, I've recently been doing just all the same. But I used to like a solid or like some type of like tracer on the middle, and then blinky on the thumb when I had like a whip based style, so that the solid kind of outlined the whips.
Yeah. So
Well, I mean, now that you mentioned that, like with our current iteration of gloving chips, you can technically implement different styles into each set. So set 1 could be like all the same, set 2 can be more impact based, set 3 can be more technical based. Like you can really set up yourself to have like a full arsenal of different styles in your gloves now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can literally program sets to highlight different aspects of your light show, just based on how you set it up. A really good example of this idea is the phasing variant that I used to call it Constellar, but I'm actually going to call it the Astro, because the idea is that you're changing the constellation of the stars, right? So I start out with all one color, but I have another. It's a 2-mode set, so it's one color, color 2. I will actually start going from one color to the next color, and then I would stagger the formation, and then I would do like inners and outers, or as I like to call that, the foil archetype, because of the math nomenclature thing. It made sense. But if I have like my inner fingers one color and the outer fingers a different color, if I stack my clusters like this, the 6-point setup, one side will all match up. But if I change the configuration again, I can actually have it set up where different colors still line up different ways with their different clusters. So the idea that you're able to highlight how you have your placements, and it shows you understanding and able to be aware of how you have your fingers placed and how you have your colors set up in place to your viewer. So to me, I think what was so interesting, especially starting back in the day, is that people would like do kind of like color mixing and stuff like that, but didn't really have a good sense of it. And then I would say probably from the span of like 2010 to like 2012, having one color set on all 10 fingers was like a standard. Like it was just made everything look super simple. It made everything look super clean. But I feel like as we started moving forward, then we really started changing things up. I remember when inverted thumbs were a really big thing. Like everybody was doing it for a long time, and then it just kind of like faded away for a bit.
Christina still does it.
I feel like it depends on your style, and like I feel like back then it was probably more like trails and whips based. I feel like it helps out a lot with that. But now with tech, I love having an inverted thumb, but it just doesn't really work for a lot of tech. Like if I use my thumb in a cluster and it's inverted, I don't think that'll look that good. So probably with the cluster meta now, it's a lot of people are drawn away from it.
It was also utilized to like give like a false palm light, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and I feel like palm lights are kind of having a mix. I always wanted gloves with pockets or something, you know, so we can have that more be a thing. I like how Jess literally just unsewed and then resewed like a little pocket.
Yeah.
For his little wrist ones. That's a smart idea. You know, more of that kind of ingenuity. Definitely enhances the way you can just stand out just with your base set alone. Not even moving yet. Just like that makes you already stand out. You're like, oh, what the hell?
Yeah.
Yeah. Personalization, everybody. That is a key takeaway from this episode is personalization. It's going to make you stand out if you really put a lot of thought into how you configure your sets. So let's actually talk about tint control a little bit more here, because this is something that, like Taj said, like he was surprised that no one really gave a whole lot of stock to, which is something I do agree. I mean, there is probably 1 or 2 like programming tutorials that really talk about tint control, and one that pops right off the top of my head is Ice Cream Teddy's hidden gem programming tutorial that he has on Amazing Lights YouTube channel. That opened the idea to me about how to hide colors, which is something a lot of people always ask me. Like, I want to have more colors in, but I don't want it to mess with my overall tint. And it's just like, you just take the ones that you don't want to affect your tint and make them as low as possible. People will still see them. They're just not going to be visible when it's idle type deal. Is there any...
I've got an interesting theory on that. So, like with color theory, I kind of relate it to like musical scales. And from my understanding, I only learned music a little bit. And when I was learning scales on the guitar, he explained to me that like if you have like a basic like 3-note scale, there'll be like one main note that you like play prominently, and then you'll have like a note that is like you don't want to hold on it for too long. I kind of think color theory can sometimes be a lot like that, where you might want to have like a main color and then like a color that's just subtly there. And so you could use tint control to kind of do that by either dimming it down, or like maybe you have your main color appear like 3 times in some different tints, and then you just have like a little splash of like a dark red or like a purple or something.
Yeah. I had a setup one time, and I kind of like called it the revamp impacting set, which is, you know, the RGB with the yellow middles, right? But I made them all have 4 colors. I had them, all 4 of them have red, yellow, green, blue. But how I set up the tints was that I made sure that the yellow, red, and green were brighter on my middle fingers, so that way the idle tint was a yellow. Because to people who might not know, red and green together in additive color theory makes yellow. So what I did with the other fingers is I made green and blue on high, and I put red and yellow on medium, and it gave more of that kind of cyan color that is pretty prominent with like old Raven chips. And that was kind of the idea that I was going behind it. Unfortunately, though, when I would do a lot of dynamic movesets, people thought I had rainbow color sets, and it's like, nope, it's just 4 colors. But that was kind of like the idea, is that my idle tint stuck out to them the most. Because
So it's almost like you splashed a different idle tint in, so that it used additive color theory on the idle tint to make a different color. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
The other thing I also learned from my time dealing with tint controls is that if you have a secondary color and you have the 2 primary colors in your set, put that secondary color in between those 2 primary colors that it's a part of. In a weird way, it just for some reason always blended a lot better and made those colors that you are trying to hide a lot easier. I don't know if you guys ever played around with that idea or not.
Yeah. So fun fact, the Atoms blend that with their accelerometers. So you don't actually have to program or add those colors in. Atoms already did it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you like FL, there you go. You can literally skip that step because technology has evolved so far from what we started with and what we are used to. And I feel like the math is now different now. So what I mean by that is with open source, you can really get into the nitty gritty of idle tint manipulation. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you guys can see what I'm looking at, and then hopefully my camera can pick up what I'm doing. So what is an idle tint for us is just like when we're not moving our gloves, right? But in color theory, for me, is like, how do we create the color white? So for example, in this example, if I wanted a white tint RGB, how would I go about doing that? So the way you would do that is the math in this case would be 255. So in this example, with my vortex editor, you can see that I have blue at 255, green at 0, and red at 0, meaning there's no colors outside of this blue value that is showing blue. And then the same could be said for all the other values, so red and green. But if I wanted to do something like, I don't know, I want a purple tint RPG or purple tint RPG, right? So I'll just like go here, and then I'll just read these values. So 117, 130. So if I go to red and change this to 81, and then a 17 and 130. So if I go here, 17. Okay, I'm being weird. Okay, 17, and then down here at 130. And if I just remove this purple now, my idle tint is actually purple now.
That's
Yeah,
smart.
so you're literally like manipulating the values of what the idle tint you want to be. So as you can see, like here, I don't know if you guys can see that too well, but it's a RGB purple now,
That's
basically.
sick.
So if you do the math of the color and the idle you want and just manipulate your set that way, you can actually manipulate your idle tint purely off math. So in this example, if I wanted a white tint, I would just max out all the values. But if I wanted a purple tint, I would actually have to look at the color purple, see what values create that color purple, and then separate that into my color palette. And realistically, if the math is correct, usually you can mix any amount of colors in this sense, as long as your math adds up to 252 for the value, that'll be your dominant idle tint.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's interesting. It'd be cool to see some software that would like you could put color combos in, and it could show you all the possible idle tints with those colors. Because like, let's say you're using like blue green, for example, you're not going to be able to do like a red tint blue green. It's just impossible. But like, if you have like 3 colors, like let's say like a turquoise, pink, green, like what idle tints are possible with that combo? Because you couldn't use that technique that you just showed because it's a little more complex.
Yeah. So essentially, like, I don't have the math solved. Like, this is way too many numbers and way too many variables, especially if I wanted to do something like a 7 color, where I want my 7 color tint to be like orange or something, and I'm not using orange at all in my light. Then it becomes a little complex. So you can make it as complex as you really wanted to, but if you wanted to do something simple as like a white tint, which I think is by far the easiest idle tint to do now, because you can just manipulate all your values, add them up to 255, and regardless of what colors you pick, as long as your math adds a 255 for all 3 values, you'll have a white tint no matter what.
You had the Adam's Diary that I stole many sets from. There was one set in there. It's from a while ago, so I don't remember what it is. But it was like this crazy combination. I think you had like the amount of colors maxed out in it, and it was like there was like some dark versions of the colors. The main colors were like pink, green, blue, and there was a bunch of different shades of it, and it ended up being like this really nice looking gray tint that looked amazing. And I was just like, I don't know what you did to figure that out.
Here's what I did to figure that out. Excuse my language, I don't know if it's like allowed, but I f***ed around and found out. So over my tenure as a glover, I've probably burned about 10,000 batteries. And I did that all without actually looking at code or just like guesstimating the shades. So that combination came about just purely off experimentation.
Okay, that's what I thought. But that color set blew my mind so hard. And it kind of even like got me into like thinking about idle tint, because it just made no sense to me. It was funny because I was going through the Adam's Diary that you made and just like going top to bottom and just trying them out. And I found that one, and that one stuck for a while.
Well, yeah, so in this sense, like, if black is the absence of color, which is our blank, that means white would be the combination of all colors. So you just kind of like the slider, you just pick and choose where you want it, define how many colors you want to use, and then as long as your math on those color values equals 255 for red, green, and blue, you're chilling. It's going to be white tint no matter what.
That does
At least
make
that's
sense.
the theory. That is the theory, but I think my math is correct in that regard. So it needs further experimentation, and the issue I have with this as far as experimentation and going through it is there's an infinite amount of colors and combinations. So color theory within our programming will never be solved.
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever have like a finite book type deal that like sets like this is all the things that we have are able to do with it, because it's there's just so much of a minutia of details between saturation, brightness, and blending.
Oh, it goes way deeper than that, because with the vortex editor, you get to manipulate the hue, the saturation, the value, even the minute spacing of the pattern you're working with. If you combine all those variables with the amount of colors you can pick, it's just too much. It's realistically too much to learn and like absorb. So my advice right now for anyone who's really interested in the color theory aspect of gloving is stick with the basics. So in this sense, try to use those traditional methods to doing that, and then slowly build upon that aspect of it and mix and match, and then try to manipulate your flashing pattern in that sense. So I also have another thing to share. So this is how I've always viewed a flashing pattern. I have good old Microsoft Paint here in my example, and essentially I've never viewed like Amazings or FLs or LEDs manuals. The way they show trails in their instruction manuals has always been like a circle, or like in their demonstration videos, it's always been like a circle, because we're all autistic lovers and like our whirly doos. I never really viewed it like that. I have always viewed the line. I've always viewed flashing patterns as a line, and essentially, like, if, for example, if this is my strobe, if I take this blue out, what happens? And that is the ultimate question of what happens when you mess with your spacing. And each flashing pattern has already like dedicated. Oh wait, where did my screen go? Oh, hold on. I did applications there instead of like actual screen share. So to go back to this aspect of it again, when you're here, these values on the right here, for the editor, they manipulate everything. So duration, timing, like everything you can ever imagine or need for a light, you can manipulate through here. So not only can you add artificial spacing, but you can actually manipulate the spacings of the defaulted flashing patterns based off of everything we've done before.
Yeah.
It also
Go ahead, Scotty.
oh, go ahead. Okay, so it made me think, like, when you were talking about the math behind like adding up the values to get the idle tint, when you factor in spacing and like how long, like let's say you have a dash stop, well, whatever color is the dash is now on longer, so you're multiplying that value a little bit more than the other colors, so that can then alter your tint as well.
Yeah, and then certain modes, that's just like, it is what it is, and there's certain modes you just cannot like manipulate the idle to the degree you would want it to. I'm pretty sure someone will figure it out. It's not gonna be me because I'm retired, but I do know for certain, like modes like dash top, like you'd mentioned, your first color will be your like idle, no matter what, because the duration of which that dash shows outweighs the actual frequency of the other lights being displayed. So your dash top, your initial dash top color would be your tint, no matter what. And in a weird way, you're like faking tints. I know back in the day, well, it feels weird to say back in the day because it's been a few years now. So when accelerometers came out and you had,
I was just gonna say,
like,
let's keep in mind, accelerometers came out in 2014. That's 10
yeah,
years ago. So
10 years ago. That's why I was like, damn, has it really been 10 years?
it has been 10 years. That's how.
Yeah. So
insane it
like
is.
with accelerometers, like one of the first things I thought of was like, oh, you can just fake your tints now. It doesn't matter. You don't need any color theory to fake your tint, because your sequence 1 will always be the tint of your desire, and then your sequence 2 will be whatever color palette you want. So back to what you were saying, like, oh, we'll never get like a red tint blue green. Technically now we can, but it's like a fake. It's like you visually need to manipulate your shows to fit that agenda to work properly.
Yeah. And like a very simple idea, I also want to make sure that I kind of disclose. When it comes to idle tints, your flash pattern does affect how it's going to be based on how long, like we were saying, how long the duration is for each color, but it's also the spacing between the on-off functionality of when the light is actually giving you the color, and then when it turns off to give you that spacing that the strobe patterns do. So if you have a much more, as we like to call it, a blinkier set, the color blending is not really actually going to happen because you have those timing discrepancies happening with the colors. So the tighter that you can make those colors sit together, the easier it's going to be for you to get that idle tint. Because I know if you use DOPS is like a really great example of, it's really tight and blends the color really, really well without having much of a stutter or flicker look to it, as opposed to like hyperstrobe, where it's actually a lot brighter and it's also a little bit longer in terms of the on duration. So you don't really get as much of a blend, but you get kind of more of that sequence flashing that you're we're kind of prone to from like cop lights or any emergency vehicles or first responders vehicles. But I think going into what we try to talk about when it comes to flash pattern manipulation, at least for me, this was based on the idea of the built-in programming features that the chips had themselves, and how many blinks you add into your color set is going to manipulate how your flash pattern is going to look. That's how you can make one flash pattern look a lot more blinkier, because you have all these blinks. But I think now, since we have advanced to the editor paradigm, as I'm going to call it, because that's pretty much what it is now, the newer chips have their own editors that they can manipulate whatever they want. I think people might say that they don't really need to worry about adding blinks, but I feel like you are able to pull off more with the inclusion of blink placement with your color sets. So I don't know if you guys feel any different on that.
Is that something you've heard people say? They say they don't need blinks? Or
I think people might consider that it's not as important to utilize.
Right. Okay.
Because since we now can
have defined so many different variations of these blanked sets.
That's right. Yeah. Okay.
You're adding another blank, turning it into technically that one.
Yeah, maybe. That makes sense.
Someone could say that, but yeah.
Like you could just use a different mode that has it like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a good example is how do you replicate hyperstrobe using the chroma mode, right? Or the chroma flash pattern. You just add a blank in between every one of your colors. Boom. It is now a hyperstrobe. That's the idea of understanding what flash pattern manipulation was. At least to me, that's what it was for a long time. I would say certainly now it's a lot more different. It's actually a lot more complex. There's a lot more layers into dynamics now, and especially with the induction of multi-bulb chips now, color theory is now going to have a whole different reformation to it, just because understanding how your idle tints on both your top light and your tip light is going to affect each other, how they actually complement each other, do they actually bleed on each other. That's a whole new dynamic that I don't even think we even touched the surface on yet.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
mean, while we're on the topic, I really like the
that are stuck like on the vortex. They're flashing patterns. Since it's a set that's synced up, you cannot recreate on another set. And same like synergies, vice versa. That's another thing too.
I like the using the bleed effect, because you mentioned the top light interacting with the bottom or with the tip light. Having actually Zan showed me a cool technique, because I made that tutorial on using I call it ghosting, where you intentionally make the top light on when the tip light is a blank. And so a good way to recreate this, or make it theoretical, where you can do it every time, is if both of the modes are DOPs and you alternate. So the tip light is blank color, and then the top light is color blank. Then in between the colors, the tip light is gonna have like a ghost effect, where it kind of just trickles up the diffuser. Really awesome technique. Do blank white, and then you could have RGBs coming in between, or whatever you want to do. It's an awesome technique. If you haven't messed with it, definitely make a set with it.
Oh yeah.
Huh.
Did y'all see those new diffusers that FL put out that now offers, in a way, a third light component? It's not a literal light, but it's like a colored dot on these little eyeballs.
Yeah, the iris diffuser.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I got the beta test those. Those were cool.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. That's a cool other factor. That's another thing to add on.
This
to
is
whatever's happening now.
This is the ghosting effect that I was talking about. So you can see red, pink, or pink, blue, green, but the
like
top is only the top is only white, or the tip rather, and then the it's so hard to get it on camera, but you can kind of see where. There we go. And now you can kind of see it.
Yeah, I see it where it bleeds in because you can actually see the source being from a different point.
Yeah, but then like if I'm throwing a whip, you see it from this angle, and yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I see it.
Honestly, guys, our hobby costs too much. Our hobby costs way too much. Think about it. If you're not using the rechargeable stuff, you have to buy batteries, you have to buy gloves, you gotta think about your diffusers, you gotta think about your casings, you gotta think about getting to the festival and paying for it. Like, our hobby costs too much.
Yeah.
And I think it gets worse the more we dive into color theory, because now you're like, oh, the iris has a red dot on the top of the diffuser. Cool. What about a blue diffuser? What about a green diffuser? Like we used to have back in the day. Now you're mixing color theory with outside factors like your casings and diffusers, and now you're in a rabbit hole you can't climb out of. So I've always suggested keep it simple and keep it to things that you like. I think one of the worst requests that I got consistently back in the day was like, oh, I want something trippy. I was like, what's trippy to me is not gonna be trippy to you, man. Like that's never gonna work out, and that's such a vague description of what you're looking for. And I think having defined requirements of what you want out of your glove set is like very key in that aspect. And it kind of sucks now because it feels like a lost art in a weird way, because to me gloving back in the day was like connecting with your audience with whatever movements you had and expressing yourself with the colors you picked, not because someone like me, I was like, oh, go use XYZ as your color set and you'll be good. Like, you need to have self-expression, and then accessorizing in this sense is a huge rabbit hole, because now my dumb brain is like, okay, what if I just did a solid green for my tip and top, but my casing is blue and my diffuser has a red dot? Like, you can do like nonsense now. It's like ridiculous.
You can really personalize yourself. I always personally, how I look at each chip, it's like they're a different character. I like to use whatever was innovative in that light and make sets dedicated to those things, and I use those lights for those purposes to showcase those things. I feel like people, since they don't have those lights, they don't relate and they don't think about those things, because they just have a lot of things they take for granted, which is fair. You have so much stuff now, it's totally easy to overlook them. But going back to the fundamentals for this stuff, this conversation is going to hopefully help people on that, get them to look at it differently. Just think about it.
On the topic of like individuality, have you guys like traded with Pinky recently? He got duos, and if I say the word the Pinky set, what comes to your guys' mind? Did something specific come to mind? So he has this set from a video that like popped off on Glover's Lounge, where he's using like monochromatic like versions of pink, and each finger has like a different shade of pink, and when he's doing like dial positions and stuff, they line up in really creative ways. It's almost like he like designed a set and then was exploring concepts and found different positions where the colors kind of line up in unique ways. Well, now he's got another light, and so now he's incorporated like the other light into this weird pattern of different shades of pink. And then when he's doing his like crazy like 3D tech, it lines up in some unique ways. When I traded with him, it seemed like he hadn't quite found those positions that he had found with his other set, but it opened my mind to like, what are like positions kind of like the sets we were talking about where like the pyramid lines up. Well, okay, now you have a top light that can line up like certain 3D tech in different ways. That's one thing I'd like to see more people utilize, because I could tell Pinky was onto something, but he wasn't quite there yet, and I want to see him get there.
Here, can I explain to you? Like, it's probably similar, but not exactly the same. There's a set that I used to do about all my old Spectras. I haven't redone it since, because I haven't been able to use the app that gave me almost dark color. I'm sure I could probably do it now. I just haven't gone out of my way to do it. But basically, since it was stuck, I believe 8 modes on that light, 8 or 7. The first mode was just a standard rainbow. So I went red, blue, yellow, red, white, yellow, green, blue. That's what it was. And then I mirrored it on this side. And then the next mode was basically a shadow. And then the first color is the main theme. So I went red, almost black, white, red, yellow, red, green, red, blue, red. And then so on and so forth for the whole set. And then by the end of it, I had a secret set. Because, I had like the almost black thing on each finger at some point, because when I went down, that's just what I did. That was just my thought. I could go back into each one and pull out that secret one, and each one had a different flashing pattern on top of that. Because I kind of like made, as I went down that color hole, I kind of used Taj's old video of the method of having each flashing pattern have that natural contrast, so that kept it interesting. Whether it being like more of a subtle to a flashy, that kind of thought process. Made something really, really interesting. I don't know if y'all done anything like that.
To me, it kind of sounds like it is color theory, but at the same time, it also makes me think of like complementary flash pattern theory, of like just trying to understand like which flash patterns actually complement each other.
Okay, I know you just made that one up. I've never heard of complementary flashing pattern theory. I don't think that's a real phrase. I think that's only really exclusive to us.
Well,
I mean, it makes sense. It's a phrase for something we're all thinking about,
That's how we get.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute, that's not real.
Like that. Yeah, I
None
agree.
of my research said that one.
Well, to me, the very simple premise, just like how Scotty was talking about having a tracer on his middle, that complements whatever flash patterns that you're using because of how it complements your move sets. But there are certain ones that will clash, in my opinion. A good example is I tried using Strobe and Hyperstrobe together, and it just did not work out really well, in my opinion. I don't know how else to explain it. It just felt too disjointed between, I guess, how far the gap is for Strobe compared to how Hyperstrobe is. And also because on the older legacy chips, Hyperstrobe was always brighter than most of the other flashing patterns, so which also makes sense because of duration. But
yeah, honestly, the second LED has, I think, ruined color theory for me personally, because now it's just the rabbit hole is just too big. Like you will dive down and you will not climb out it. I've identified that, and like what's the saying? Like if you stare at the abyss long enough, it'll stare back at you.
yeah,
That's how I feel about having the second LED, because again, it's just like how more nuanced can we get before it's ridiculous? And I think we're slowly approaching that point where, like, all right, this is getting a little dumb.
I will say if another light bulb gets introduced to the chip, then I think we've gone too far.
Yeah, it's giving me a bit of decision paralysis where, like, with my duos, I kind of just hit the randomizer until I see something that looks good, because I have
we need to start
too many
customizing
ideas.
it.
Yeah,
like making
The
that
actual
personal.
love itself, yeah. I'm super down with that. I think that would be more interesting. Like I know JJ, I don't know if for the viewers know who PM Jetplane is. He's doing like custom glove bags now. I was like, dude, where was this like 10 years ago? I would have loved this.
That's something I've pitched to a bunch of companies. I'm glad someone's doing it, because those Diddy bags are so easy to just, it's awesome. I want those kind of things to happen. I know some people want to make some hard casings type things, just like, because. No, like hard like cases for gloves for the
like a traveling case.
Yeah, like a traveling case.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, like the duos. Yeah. The duos have their own case now.
Well, it's a dock for the charger, but some people. I personally don't like the dock. I do like the dock, but I don't, because I hate the fact that I gotta take my lights out and do that whole thing. If I had another set, that'd make it a lot more likable, because I'm like, cool. But I hate that I have to like do that process. It makes me want to choose another set, even though I love using them. If when they're in that dock, it bugs me.
It's a lot better to change the whole batteries out, though. It's a decent trade-off.
Yeah, definitely agree. It's a lot fast. Still fast. Like 30 minutes is nothing.
Yeah.
But when I'm in that crucial moment, I'm like,
It's tough.
yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the way I have my vortexes set up. So like I treat it kind of like the way I treat like when I'm operating lasers live. I don't know what the next song is going to be. I don't even necessarily know like what genre I'm going to be performing to. So I have to be kind of just ready for everything. And so like with gloving, it's the same way. You know, you're at a concert, you might know the artist, but you don't know what is necessarily coming in the next 2 minutes. So I kind of have my pattern set up where it's like alternates between like a smooth pattern and like a blinky pattern. And so any change in music, I can just quickly change to a set that somewhat matches the vibe. And there's been so many situations where I'm in a smooth set and then it goes to like a build up that's like really stuttery, or like you have like a kick that's like hitting over and over again, and I switch to that blinky set and it just lines up perfectly. Do you guys do anything like that?
Yeah. So with my vortexes, I do something similar based on, I used to try some of the sets that you had made. But I also rock a second thumb. I typically rock my supernovas underneath because I have programmed sets that are blank, and I'll go into like a conjuring type thing, or they're blank on just my thumbs, and I'll go into an impact section. So like I have kind of like how you're describing, like a set routine of routines that you can kind of like move around, and just like I hop in here and transition to that, and it's like a overarching style thing, but you're not necessarily limited. It's like it gives you direction.
Yeah.
I don't think they necessarily had anything like that. I mean, especially me as a phaser who was kind of like beholden to the pre-control setup with chips. I really had to figure out how I was going to set things up that will complement each other. And this is where I kind of discovered the idea of complementary flash pattern theory, because like going from regular strobe into a hyper strobe, like especially if you do like all these are strobes and then you make your index and rings into hyper strobe, those actually complemented a lot of your shapes and whips as well without overpowering the other flash pattern. So that helped me a whole lot. Not only that, like also how I configured the color settings between all those. It was like having sets in between the sets type deal. So it's actually kind of synergizing my sets within themselves.
Yeah.
But I can certainly say I don't think I really had any thought on that. I think it was just how I had my setups were how they were. But I can definitely see if you're using accelerometers, trying to pull something off like that. Because I mean, like using meta mode is it meta mode? The one that changes flash patterns as faster you go?
The one that goes from, that's purely based on it goes from a really blinky to a doppy.
Yeah, to dops. Yeah. So I think like using the accelerometer feature in that aspect, I think you can probably pull something off a lot closer to that. Which maybe is actually a good segue into talking about just accelerometer features and how much that actually brings about a completely different dynamic of programming theory.
Well, I don't think it really changes much because for Adam specifically, a lot of the blending was done for you. So the headache was just not there, and you never really needed to do any of it. So it didn't really add much. It was more so like, okay, now how do we manipulate sequence 1, 2, and 3? Or like if I'm using like the geo mode, where it's like, okay, what position color do I want here? And then you can probably do something really interesting with that, where like, for example, for geo mode, like if your up position with your index was red, on your ring finger you can make it blue, and then vice versa. If you put your index position down, it would be blue, and then index position here would be red. Like you can do cool stuff like that, and that doesn't really add anything in terms of theory in my eyes. it more so adds on to the arsenal that you already have pre-existing.
That'd be
I
crazy.
used,
On the piano or something
Yeah.
like that. That'd be cool.
I feel like there's a lot of like ways to fake a mode swap with the accelerometer.
Mhm.
So I use the geo mode to kind of do this, where the last color was the same, but the first color I had in like a different pattern. I forget exactly how I used it. I think I had it where the colors would kind of line up. It would go to purple as the last color, and then depending on which finger it was either red or blue on different fingers. And so I could go from like whips and then land on like a dial position, and then it would look like it changed from a purple set to alternating red and blue set.
Yeah, okay, so I've definitely done something similar, and I called it my domain expansion. So what I did was essentially where I would fake the first sequence would be white. That's it. My second sequence would be each finger would be a different color of the rainbow, and then my indexes and my thumbs would be additive color theory, where it would blend something there, and then my third mode would be the same thing except in reverse.
Nice.
That's wild.
So if you wanted to like visualize that, right? If my left hand is mainly warm colors and my right hand is cooler colors, that's my second sequence, right? Now my third sequence would be that in reverse. And my first sequence tying it all together would be the tint I chose.
I kind of did something similar with the special SE Adams. It wasn't 100. It was like utilizing the cool white and warm white, and like the fact that you had that speed, right? So you can make it like both the same, and then same. Yeah.
Yeah, I did something
cool.
very similar to that too. That's a good technique.
That's badass, dude.
Well, I was just gonna say, speaking about geo mode, this is a particular accelerometer feature that I've been studying for years, and I just keep finding more and more things to do with it. And it kind of drives people nuts, because like I show them all these different things, like how your directionality will actually dictate the colors. Like you can really actually set up your shapes and stuff. Very similar to, I don't remember exactly how Puppet termed it, but the I think he called it like the monster thing, where he was like trying to do like a creature technique, and he was using forms of platforming. That was just like, wow, if you actually apply geo mode to that, you can actually come off with some really interesting designs just by how you have your fingers change based on their directionality.
I think he calls it 1 unit, and it's just utilizing everything.
Yeah. And I mean, he had like one light being red and pointing at the viewer to act as like the eye for it. It's just something of that nature. Just taking the idea of like what geo mode does is absolutely
that'd be cool.
All this talk about accelerometer. I haven't had an accelerometer set in years. Now I want to get one.
Yeah, I'm definitely not biased.
I know. I need to.
I love my atoms. My atoms are my babies.
Yeah, I really feel like the way I always tell people is like atoms are way ahead of their time in terms of what they do.
I think that Zohar just needs to fix the thumb or the conjuring for the regular atoms. I know they have the SEs to fix that whole problem, but I think that just needs to be fixed, because conjurers don't want to utilize the traditional atoms because of that fact.
Well, yeah.
What's the conjuring thing?
Ones.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's like they should just have both. That should just not be a thing.
Yeah. So essentially, Scotty, one of the key differences, and in terms of improvement from regular atoms to SE atoms, was the conjuring feature got improved. And it sounds like a tiny improvement, but essentially, like when you click on and off, you can accidentally click out of your conjure mode and go into your regular glove set.
Okay.
The way they combated that was they added, they made it longer. So you needed to click longer to not accidentally click. So what McKinnley's kind of saying is like, hey, that should just be standard on all future regular atom chips and SE atom chips. But the improvement part of it was a part of the marketing.
That makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
It shouldn't be improving. The product should just be good at what it says it does.
No, I mean, I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
So it's like, conjures. Yeah, it does conjure.
Yeah, so something I actually
Yeah.
wanted to pitch to FL was like sponsored glove sets, and what that means is like no programming. The glove sets are pre-programmed for you. You just turn them on as your burner set, and they're designed by a glover from X company, and they designed it. I always thought like that concept of a burner set was just like undervalued because you don't have to program anything. You just flash the defaults into a light, have it on and off, and that's it. That's all you really need for a burner set. Like realistically, like for example, if Scotty designed a 5-mode glove set and that's it, you don't manipulate the flashing patterns, you don't manipulate the color theory, you're just using Scotty's burner set, and then you completely cut out the necessary need for color theory or learning it. You just have something quick for a festival for like 30-40 bucks. And I thought that market was like unexplored because I don't think anyone else noticed this, but a company did do this, and they did it with Gummy, which was Flow Movement. Flow Movement had a Gummy chip, which was pre-designed by Gummy himself, and was sold that way. You couldn't like change anything. It was just, this is the Gummy glove set. That's it. This is what you're stuck with. And I thought that concept was like never used.
Are they cheaper to develop if you don't have to have the programming features built in?
Yes,
I would imagine so, because you're
Okay.
not really changing any of the components, or you're not adding any components. If anything, you're taking away features. So
Yeah.
for FL in particular, you're removing the randomizer, you're removing the XL, obviously, you're removing the color palette, you're removing the saving feature, you're removing pretty much everything. The only like pre-existing feature I imagine that stays there is the light lock, which, of course, you know, it's light lock. It's kind of a standard now.
Yeah.
That's evergreen.
That's a genius idea. I had a similar idea, but not quite. I thought it would be cool to have where you could have Glovers design the set, and then you could buy them with the pre-programmed default being that set. But that idea takes it a step further, where it's like, that's, if we can get the cost down by making them not be programmable, but you get to choose from like a list of like your favorite Glovers, like that's genius. That's a missed opportunity there.
Oh no, and the sad reality of it is too late, because we have open source now. So what difference does it make to buy the $30 burner when you can just like copy it from anything else? It doesn't make sense in a market sense anymore, because
well, it does in the sense that you can have a cheap set that you're not scared of throwing away or losing.
Yeah, but the cheaper sets nowadays that exist are the bulb chits that you can get for $20.
Yeah.
Those are like instant and reliable, and you will never care if those are disappearing.
I was just gonna say, before we really had the standardization of programmable chips, that's what the bulb chips market was pretty much doing. Like, Amazing Lights had like the Joker set, the Starburst set, all.
It's the same idea. It's like, oh, you get that
it's
exclusivity.
essentially the same idea, which I'm not gonna deny at all. But the idea of like having a glove set made by like Anti or like Mimic, and those were your just defaults, and then you could just click through your modes, whatever, and set your defaults and whatnot. I thought that was a missed opportunity for the most part. Like, even when I was a part of FL, I was like, dude, if Amazing did this, we're f***ed. Like, we're so screwed if this idea gets leaked. And you know, it just never happened. But it was just like one of those things I thought about as like a product person at the time. It was like, cool. Ions originally used to be like a concept for a fidget spinner, and then we were just like, no, wait, we can just do so much more. And then that ended up being its own thing, and then SE Adams just became its own improvement with Divergent, or like Diverge, I forgot what it was called, but that's something that the defaults on that is something I made. So if you have SE Adams and you look at those defaults, those are made by me. And the whole glove set for the SE Adams is a combination of all the sponsors working together at the time to build the SE Adams defaults. And I was like, oh, I like this idea, but what if we took it a step further? And that's kind of where that idea came from.
I gotta say, he f***ed up. He would have made way more money with the fidget spinner.
Yeah, but the problem with we were too late. That was the problem with the
that's
we were just
fair.
too
That's
late.
fair.
Yeah, just kind of like a little bit behind the curve every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, late to the party.
I feel like even if EL did do that thing, them could have just upselled the Atom. Like, well, we can just make all those right here. You know, either way, it's like if one person wins, everyone kind of wins because the market just grows as a whole.
Yeah.
But people don't look at that. They're like, yo, fight, mine's better. My light's more brighter than yours, bro.
OSM. I don't know if anyone will understand that one. That would,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you can apply for senior citizenship if you mention OSM.
Well, I was just gonna
Yeah.
say OSM was essentially the first chip to really introduce the idea of open source microlight technology.
And it had motion.
Yeah, and they
And
also
it-
had the OSM2s with the motion reaction. You can actually tweak
Not only was-
the settings of the accelerometer itself, which is
It had a really responsive accelerometer, and the colors looked amazing.
Oh, you guys want some like super spicy lore?
Hit me with it.
Okay, so when OSM2s were being made, I was a part of that development team as like a QA person, just to mess around with their defaults and whatnot. And I worked with an engineer. His name was John Joseph Miller. And if you look at the defaults on your OSM2s, they're the same defaults as the Ubers, by the way. Just no one ever like made note of that. I was like, I know exactly which motherfucker made these lights because he went to LED and I went to FL. So when OSM died, that's what happened. So LED had John and then FL had me.
He's like, well, I can still use this.
Yeah, pretty much. So when they were leaking, like I remember when Ubers were marketing on Glover's Lounge, it's like, oh, this is what this is. I was like, I'm pretty sure John did that. And then they kept going and going. I was like, oh, John did all of this. I was like, cool. The OSM defaults are literally the LED gloves, Uber defaults. I was like, man, this is not hype. This already exists. LED just owns the engineer now.
I do like the fact that you can do a double Aurora mode though on the Ubers. That's pretty dope.
Oh, what is it?
So they already have an Aurora mode, which is on the Auroras, which is kind of like this ever glowing rainbow that's constantly morphing type thing. And you can essentially, when the Ubers had motion, do a double Aurora.
Okay.
So based on your speed, it's pretty wild.
yeah. I do know, like particularly like with the Uber Nanos, they had their own thing going on. They had like their own like algorithm and like how you had place their colors within the color selections that you had like would dictate with on the flight. Like there's a lot of math going on there. But I think one of the things that I love the most is that a lot of people always ask me like, how am I able to recreate older sets that we haven't seen in a long time? Mostly just because Amazing Lights used to highlight those, not anymore. They stopped that really early on. Like bit fourth mode is like one of my personal favorite flash patterns, and it's literally just going on strobe, 2 colors, 3 blanks, you're done. I don't know. I think when it comes to where we are getting right now, especially in the open source meta, I guess is what we'll call it, even though I think the synergies aren't open source at all.
Yeah.
It gets really technical, but
Before we go too far, too, since we're still on LED gloves, one feature that was really cool that the Ubers had is the fact that you could basically program your favorite sets and then save them and then default to the defaults if you felt like it. Reprogram, felt like it, and then go back to your favorite sets.
That is nice.
Oh yeah, the memory ring system I thought was
That's
underexplored.
pretty.
I felt like no one else. It happened exactly one time and it never happened again.
Yeah, that's such a good feel. Like we can kind of do that with the computers now, since we can literally just save stuff, but it's not as on demand like that. That's like you're driving stick, bro, but like in the best way possible.
what do you guys think is the most versatile flash pattern?
Oh, strobe.
Just standard strobe?
Yeah, I would say. So.
I think there's an argument for tops.
If you really, really want to get technical, it would be solid.
Yeah, because you can just and make your own strobe and do all that kind of stuff.
With the vortex editor, like flashing patterns are a thing of the past. Now
Yeah.
you get to determine what your strobe looks like, what your DOPS looks like, what your strobe looks like, and
Yeah.
you can claim that they're that mode, but in reality, you can manipulate it to literally down to the singular value. So I think the concepts of flashing patterns are becoming like blurred in a sense, because of course we're gonna have like the quote unquote standard defaults, which I believe the vortex kind of took from spectras for the most part, like
Yeah.
what their spacing is. I know right now the Vortex like beta team is like working on trying to get the spacing numbers exact for all previous chips before it, for the most part. So that's like a big project and endeavor at the moment. But to me, like versatility and flashing patterns aren't real anymore, because now at this point in time, you get to decide everything. Like there's no secrets within our programming now. Everything is wide open.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I feel like there's always going to be that Glover that's not going to care about that theory. Like, and want, like, hey, yo, I know someone else thought of this. I just want to get to moving. So I feel like these markets are still possible if someone wants to attempt them, you know?
Possibly, but again, like open source is, I think, ruined color theory in the sense that you're now stuck with infinite possibilities and infinite answers to things you're looking for now. So, you know, picking and choosing is its own headache now as an artist.
Yeah, but I think with how we have the open source, like how you were demonstrating, if you wanted a particular idle tint, figuring out the values to get of that color and then programming the other colors that you were originally going to use to fit within that parameter.
Yeah.
I think there's now essentially a new paradigm of understanding how we go about doing that, because it's like, well, I want to use these colors, but what kind of idle tints am I able to come up with, which is kind of like what Scotty said. If we can actually get a program to show us what the idle tint will look like, I really definitely can see a whole new design space happening.
Yeah, I mean, with the new Vortex editor, you can kind of just like have it plugged in and then like just keep changing values and like see.
Yeah.
But it would be a lot more streamlined to just have a list that's like, here's what's possible. Don't sit there for a half hour looking through them.
I actually think the web community site can do that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible.
I'm almost positive it can do that. So now you don't actually have to look at your light. You can just look at your computer screen and like determine what
you can see the pattern and everything.
Yeah. Because if it flashes on your screen, it should give you a general idea of what it's going to be. Even if it's not exact or accurate, it'll give you a general idea of what it could possibly be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it will, like, well, the more we keep working on it, the more we will be able to innovate and fine tune that if we actually got a program that kind of show the idle tint and stuff. But it'd just be really cool if somebody's like had a couple of colors and they're like, oh, well, I want to see what other idle tint I can come up with, and they just open the idle tint bar and it's just like, here are all the color palette, or here are all the colors that you're able to pull with your idle tint with all these tweaks, and just click it from there without having to change all the other values of the colors. So sequence flash patterns, though, I think this is what kind of brings a whole new dynamic of understanding when it comes to color theory in its own right, just because of how we understand how sequence flash patterns work, which I know we don't have a whole lot of data on because this is something brand new to us via the Vortex. And I know they were saying something about the duos. I can't necessarily confirm I don't have the duos are able to do sequence flash patterns. I would really be interested to see the synergies pull off sequence flash patterns, since they have that setup of communication with them via...
I think they can. I'm almost positive they can.
They don't have the exact same, but they have things that are already similar. They just don't have that specific, but it has the capability. Yes.
Yeah.
So like, are you talking about like the Vortex, like the way that it'll have like a color
Those
rundown?
unique ones. Yeah.
I thought about a way to set that up manually on the synergies. I just don't have the patience to do it. Where like let's say you just wanted like a red to like run down, like a RGB or something.
They're already going to be delayed because it's not true sync anyways.
That's
so
that's
somewhat true.
It's difficult on the duos because they're not quote unquote connected at all. And I don't believe it's NFC. I think it is like a light refractor thing on the chipboard itself to do that. So the communication aspect of it is just not going to be there, and I don't think it would be possible for duos. But I'm pretty sure synergies can be set up in a way where if, for example, if you did have a color like running down your fingers on the top portion compared to your like the tip, I'm pretty sure synergies can do that. Vortex can do it, obviously because of the wires, but I know for certain duos can't do that at the moment. But I do believe there is plans to update that firmware.
Yes, there's plenty of room to be able to do that on the chip and upgrade it.
I mean, it would be interesting to see the duos be able to have like the drip sequence flash pattern where it goes from the top to the tip. Just because since it's not so synchronized with like the Vortex has it set up, and since they're all wireless from that point, it'd just be interesting to see the drip happening at different intervals with each other, not even like synchronized in that fashion. But
yeah, I mean, I feel like that you could set up manually just by like placing the blanks in the right spots. I feel like you could get that effect.
Yeah, it would just be very interesting to see. I will certainly say, are we really going to get to a point where we can have like wireless sequence flash patterns? Like synergies kind of do offer that as a proof of concept, but I don't know.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think to take it a step further, you have that, and now you have motion control on it. What happens then?
I also had an idea of like now that I've got into like lighting and laser production, like imagine if the lighting guy had his rig hooked up to Synergy Tech on his PC, and so everybody could like sync up their lights to the lighting deck. If there was like a QR code, or like they gave the like little like serial number that you need, and you could download that onto your synergies before you go to a festival or something. The lighting guy changes the stage lighting to green, and everybody that has synergies that are connected, their lights change to green. That would be fucking sick.
No, I think I would be annoyed. I spent way too much time on color theory to let some stage nerd take over.
That's true, but so did they. So did they, and now your colors don't clash with the stage lighting.
I mean, I think it would be really cool to actually see something like that. Like if I was a spectator getting a light show, but still see the stage and like on the periphery, and his color sets are changing with the stage set in sync, like that would actually be kind of cool to see.
It would be dope because then I would get color changes on beat, and I didn't even have to think about it.
I don't know. Sounds like a psyop.
I think it would be fun at least once. I would at least want to do it once, and then the only bad thing I could see with that is like, let's say I don't want a glove right now, and my synergies are just in my backpack, just on.
Yeah, they're just freaking out.
I guess you could probably lock them, but I don't know.
I just think it'd be funny if Scotty's just sitting there opening up his backpack and just a bunch of lights come out of it. Whoa!
Yeah.
A little party in the bag.
Right? Is the jellyfish song from SpongeBob going on in there?
But I think it would be sick just to see if it's possible. It would take like probably some new software being designed, but just the idea of it.
By the hardware, I would argue you're probably more limited by the hardware than the actual software itself, because I think for software, in terms of solutions, all solutions exist. You just have to find them or make them yourselves. But I think hardware limitations is where we're stuck now.
Yeah, I think it would just take whatever way it's communicating. You would need a device that does it in a bigger scale, because I don't know the distance on synergies, but I think like from across the festival, I don't think it would work. But
you would need to set up like reception poles for it. So like you would need like a specific totem to go to activate that version of the synergy, and then you would have like a main tower, which would be your booth, that would communicate with these other totems to then activate. I think that could be a potential solution. That way you're not just like walking around aimlessly and then your lights just like freaking out in your backpack or something.
No, that would be an interesting thing to see. Is there any particular sequence flash patterns that you guys have screwed around with that you really, really like?
I don't know the names of any of them.
What?
7 low blue, 1 high red. That's my favorite like color pattern. Insert that into pattern.
You're talking colors. I thought you were talking like the vortex like sequencing flashing patterns.
That's what I was actually talking about. Was actual sequence flash patterns on the Vortex. Like I know all of us are proud owners of Vortexes. I think for me, the Lighthouse one, where it basically like has one color, well, like it makes it look like it's at two ends and it like switches places over time, right? Essentially like a lighthouse. I thought that one's really cool. I think the worm one is also really interesting, where it basically starts bouncing between the two lights all the way down. The thing that I actually like about that one is if you make the light take blanks and drop them down on the worm.
Yeah,
that
looks cool.
It looks insane. I don't know. What do you guys? How do you guys actually feel about sequence flash patterns in general? Like,
I love them. That's like the whole reason I'm still using the vortexes is for those patterns. I don't know any of the names of them because I just kind of click through until I find one that looks cool and I'm like, yeah, I'll use that one. But I feel like they're amazing, but you kind of have to be a little careful of how you use blanks, because I've had a couple of times where I set up a set, I use too many blanks with the sequencing pattern, and I have moments where my lights are just off for way longer than they should be, and that's not good.
Yeah. Go ahead, Taj.
Oh no, I was gonna say my vortex wipe is my favorite. That just looks fresh.
Okay, yeah, vortex wipe is a really interesting one.
I feel like I need like a second vortex just so I can have one for those sets, and then like a more traditional style that I do.
Yeah,
I have a problem. I have too many lights.
Just open up a closet and it's just like glow sets all the way down.
Like a suitcase, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think I've given away like everything at this point. I think I have a total of like 2 sets now.
Nice.
I have 1, 2, 3, 4, I think about 6, 7 sets, and they're all like different chips. So, I think what I find so interesting about sequence flash patterns is that we're actually able to have something going on with our lights without us having to move. So it really allows us to emphasize more on shapes and forms, while the lights are able to do something that still draws the attention from the viewer. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's one of those things where I feel like maybe the vortex, how it's set up, that not a lot of people are interested. I know a lot of people just see the wired things, are like, yeah, no thanks. And it's just like, you really should give this a shot.
I kind of use them to troll people. I've had some people where I'll like walk up and like act like I'm a new Glover, and then I'll be like, yeah, I got this set. They're like wired and stuff, and I just know that deep down they think, okay, this guy's pretty new. And then I hit him with everything I got, and it's just hilarious, the reaction. I even had one guy, I like showed him the synergies, and he's like, do you think this is like a good set if I just started? And he's like, well, they look kind of cheaply made. Like I can tell they're definitely like kind of cheap. It was just hilarious to like then be like, oh yeah, this is the company that made your lights. This is their new model. Like.
That's hilarious.
Well, I know one of the things that are starting to pop up amongst many people in the community is there a rechargeable version of the chromas? Is there a rechargeable version of this chip? And so on and so forth. I know somebody, I believe it was Steam Boy, who asked like a while back if we were able to make a rechargeable battery that we can insert into legacy chips, like that. And I think Jared responded saying that it was, I don't know how he worded it, but I guess he said it was just not worth it. Like, it's not worth the investment. Maybe the costs were just not where it's at, or something like that. I don't know. I personally think the technology is going to advance enough that we will be able to. We just need to.
I think it's been possible. I saw somebody came in and was like, he was like some type of developer that he was asking like what people would pay for rechargeable batteries, and he was like thinking about developing them. But I think ultimately, what's taken the companies away from that is like, they sell batteries. Why would they want to sell a battery that you never have to buy again when they can sell packs of batteries and make more profit. It's just, I think that financially wouldn't make sense.
The profit margins on batteries is so minute. I don't think it matters.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Unless it's what's keeping them afloat, which is.
I mean, even if they're minute, like I've bought so many packs of batteries that like, even if they were making 10 cents, like they hit a lick. They definitely made more off of the batteries they sold me than anything else.
Dude, like I said, our hobby is too expensive, man. Like you do a cost breakdown of everything we require to be glovers. I think normal people would be like, "This sucks. Why are you here?"
I mean, yeah, it's pretty bad.
Well, I can certainly say that, yeah, we do have a serious hole in the market for budget gloving equipment and gloving products. I don't necessarily think like the casings is necessarily the issue. I know a lot of people just like their main concern is the chip and like that being the cost of entry. I mean,
yeah,
the irons are what, $99 right now? I think.
I think it's like 89. I think. Someone fact check that.
I'll double check that real quick.
Whatever's on GlowFX, I think it's like $80 for those gels.
Oh yeah, that's right. He calls those the GlowFX gel chips. I always thought that was weird.
Gel casings. I had a friend. That's what her set was. Those batteries and the way that you take that casing off is trash. It hurt the hell out of my hands. And they're, of course, they're their own unique battery. So that you can only buy those batteries from them. Which is smart.
I mean, Amazing Lights made the Bluetooth hub for their Spectras be 2020 batteries, I believe.
Yeah, but you could still use any of the other ones. They just told you to use those.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. It was like they were trying to like, make you. It's like a.
The other one, physically, it was made in a way that the size mattered.
On the.
Well,
gels.
I mean, if you guys want to get down to the nitty gritty of the problems with gloving chips that I've had, pretty much for the longest time now, even if we do have rechargeable ones, is that our problem was. And I feel like every company, I don't know how they just missed this mark, was they built the chips around the battery and not around our fingers. And that's why we have weird shapes.
Mm-hmm.
That's certainly true. I think that's kind of like how it went. I don't know. The drop series from Liquid Emotions, I think they just wanted that really cool like teardrop design. Because I remember the drop reses, how they looked. It was much more of their classic telltale sign of Liquid Emotions teardrop thing.
I feel like they just relied upon the gloves to luminescent enough that it didn't matter. And then it was like just cool for the person who knew, as the person who bought them, to take them out and be like, yeah, look at my shit, bro. They're this one, these exact ones, that kind of thing. Just like how when you're changing your batteries, you're like, oh, dude, it says Adams right there. You see that, bro? I'm hyped to change my batteries now. Like, just one of those things that you're doing as a consumer. Like opening the box, like, oh, it's limited edition, bro. God, it's just
the boards are red instead of green.
Yeah. Oh, whoa, that's how I know, bro. Yeah. I got the new red chips, bro. Like that kind of thing.
Or you also see like.
I cannot believe we let Amazing get away with that kind of marketing. Where like, here's the chromas, here's the chroma 24s, here's the special edition 36s, here's the controls. Like, we really let them get away with that. As a community, we failed.
It's like they were doing what Nike did, only except the chips weren't as reliable in like the sense of like Nike, you buy the thing, thing's gonna last for a decade. You buy variants because you like it so much. These weren't lasting that long. And they're offering just milking us away. It took like FL and LED gloves to get them to to quit bullshitting, to put it simply.
Yeah, I mean, I personally will still sit here and say that the Chroma controls were pretty much their pinnacle. Like, that was the pinnacle chip that they had. That was the best quality. But
yeah, those controls were awesome.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, though. I would certainly say, like, between all the different ways that we have developed the technology between flash patterns and color theory and tint control and accelerometers, now with sequence flash patterns. I just think we're always going to see a shift. I think one of the things I feel like right now that we're not seeing that we used to see with these shifts is that there was a lot more people a little bit more engaged with that kind of conversation, especially like when accelerometers and stuff started coming out. There was a lot more engagement in that. That's why we have like the different chip mode swap groups on Facebook. Like there's a dozen of them now. I mean, for crying out loud, I just saw that they also made a synergies and a duos mode swap thing, which is hilarious.
I honestly think the Facebook mode swaps groups are like obsolete now.
Yeah,
They should just all move to. They should just move to Discord.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know if anyone's in Puppet's Gloving Academy, but there's like a section for that now where I can share the actual file from my Vortex directly to someone, and they can just download the file, upload it onto their Vortex, and then now they have what I'm looking at without actually having to program anything.
Yeah,
So I think mode swap groups are like obsolete in that sense. And if anyone really needs tests, like I created those 2 documents specifically for that reason.
The Vortex, whenever the first time the Vortex beta happened, we have all those over here as well. We got a whole section for each of them, each chip, as well as the manuals and pattern resources, all this stuff. It just takes people wanting to go look for the answers and do the work. Because even those old Facebook groups, you just see people just asking for things. You don't see too many people actually making things, you know? Trying to, like with this video, giving people the tools to be able to make those kind of things like you and many others have done, I think is what's their key in making their own stamp. Like, hey, here's my set of modes, you know?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's kind of how I took over. No one was making shit. I was the only one really consistently, like, I think the worst time was like when, before I became an admin, was probably the worst for Chroma Mode Swap, because I was posting something like every hour. I was just spamming the group.
Yeah, otherwise, you know, that was sparking that thing and keeping people creative, trying to inspire them to do more. I feel that, bro. It's hard to find and get someone to fill that void. And I think the only person I thought was like Max Cohen and a couple BMO sets. It's hard to get people to want to think outside the box like that, especially when they know someone's doing it. So like, okay, why do I need to fill that spot? Someone's doing it.
It's kind of annoying to communicate, like when you have to like tell someone how to program a set that you programmed like a year ago. You're just like, it's like this color with that color.
And that's why the document exists.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's funny. I still, to this day, if I want to make a new color set or a new glove set together, I still write it all down. I mean, I still have pages of just glove sets in a folder because of that. And the funny thing is that I always like going back to those to be like, kind of like reminisce of what I was thinking of at that time period. And I always find something new to do with them. Like I always figure out a new way to tweak it and things like that. The other thing is, well, like if you, at least with like older Amazing videos, they used to put like the specifications of like what chip they were using, what colors that they're using, how it was set up. And those are always interesting that you can go and dig through those to find that stuff. Mm-hmm. But I think probably the best the thing that we could probably round this off is what features do you think we need to explore further in to really help try to streamline a lot of the stuff that already came before?
I definitely feel like the memory bank feature is something is missed. Like I said, it happened literally a total of 1 time and just never happened again. And I think that should be a really highlighted feature. Like being able to set your own defaults is huge.
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool. Do you guys feel like we'll eventually get to like mobile app programming?
Yeah, there are already talks for a couple things. I think another thing that I think could be used more, but just programmed better, was like mode reordering and like
Yeah.
or like how many modes you have, because that thing was a great feature. It just was poorly made, so it was hard to utilize. But it was a great idea.
Yeah, and this just goes back to what I was saying earlier, where I feel like on-chip programming is dead because
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, the synergies and the duos and the vortex, pain in the ass to program manually. Holy shit, I'd rather kill myself.
I think the
I'd rather.
vortex is super easy.
Energy is not
Well,
possible. But the other two, yeah, I agree.
yeah, they're terrible. Like for the most part, I think the experience of programming on site is god awful. Like I'm gonna be super biased and say like FL did it right, but like when I look at the way you need to program the second LED on a duo, I'm just like, yeah, I'm good, man. I'm just gonna go on my computer. Forget this.
For me, I don't mind it too much. It's just the fact that I'm colorblind. I need a manual that tells me what number is this color. I can't really do that with the vortexes and the duos. I'm kind of just like, all right, yo, is this it, Ra? Is that one that? Cool. I have to rely upon someone else to tell me. I can't just know. Like I know which tone it is, but I don't know which specific color it is. You know, that makes sense. Like I know blue. I don't know the difference between indigo and yada yada. You know.
Yeah, I mean the vortexes have like what I would probably call like a basic built-in programming feature. You know, it gives you all the essential things you need. Like you have the color selection, flash pattern selection, global brightness, transfer, and I think that's it. You don't necessarily get mode reordering unless you connect it to a computer. So there's other features that the computer editor gives you that you don't have built in, and I'm totally fine with that. Like that, I don't want to have all the bells and whistles on the built-in programming. I just feel like I want the absolute essentials that are important.
Sure.
So
Yeah, I think it's the best because like you can also have the set on when you're like changing them, so you can make a change, throw a couple whips, make a change, and switch between that. And then you can also see the set like listed, so like you don't have to like be like, all right, where is the blue in that? And you know, if you need to change something, you can be like, okay, well, let me go to just the blue that I want to change and just change that versus a lot of other ones you just have to like completely restart, you know.
yeah, I mean, if we take the color programming feature that the vortex is built with, the 4 quadrants with the 4 within that 4 and the 4 and the 4 of that, and put that on a single bulb chip, it will make it a lot easier and streamlined. But I know a lot of people are like, well, what if I want to just tweak one of the colors? Well, I don't know if we actually want to have like a color edit setup type deal. I don't think that's actually going to be as practical.
Well, that's kind of like what already exists on the duos and the vortexes. Is that once you have your mode set, whenever you go into color mode change or whatever, you're just editing that set. You can just go over and look and see what colors are in there, and just change that one if you want to. So they have made it that easy.
Oh, I didn't know they did it on the duos, but
It's the same. It's the same program.
okay.
It's the same thing.
One feature I'm glad is coming back is like community sets, like a
Yes.
easy one-stop shop. I go here and I see a list of a bunch of people's sets. That was like the only thing that I liked about the what is it? The Spectras.
Yeah.
It was because I could just go in there, download a set, and throw it on. Because when I had those, I would just every time I went and gloved, I would pick a different set, and it was quick.
They're gone. That Facebook third-party application bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So many sets.
I have no idea what they were thinking of when they did that.
Well, we just had no way to like save anything. That's what sucked. Is there was no heads up. It was just all right. It's gone. It's gone, y'all.
And it's gone.
Yeah,
That's it.
That's some pretty wild stuff. I just never understood that. Well, McKinnley, you know, I've said this much times now. I know the duos have it. I don't know about the synergies, but I know of a timer feature. Like I know of features. I really felt like that should have been much more evergreen with all the other chips of having that. But
the duos have that capability.
yeah, that's what I mean. Like now they have that capability. I do know that the Spectres had that if you activated it through the app. But
You
it
can
wasn't.
a timer. You can still do it without it, but you can actually change the timer through that.
Yeah.
I kind of want to push back. I disagree because I think Inovas are iconic enough where you can't replicate what an Inova can accomplish through a duo or a synergy simply because of the shape of the light itself is so integral to the style.
Well, there's a whole casing you can buy that does that.
Yeah, and I understand that. And I think those casings are terrible, but that's besides the point. I think for what the intended accomplishment of that feature is, I think that you can't really replicate the same feeling of it as an artist. Because even if you did hypothetically do that, you know what you're using on your Inovas. Like you can feel that, and you'll always have that at the back of your mind.
It's like saying supernovas can't hit like an Inova though, and I'd say they can.
Well, that's
I don't know, man. Because at that point, because then it goes back to the casing thing, where we're like the shape of the case matters, and Inovas are just too iconic in that sense to like.
I think it just
Even
gives
if
it a
you did
different
use a supernova or something like that, it wouldn't make sense to do.
Well, no. What I mean is that I wish the like Inova timer and hold feature was evergreen on a lot of other chips, where it's not necessarily doing high beam, low beam, blink setup, where it's like flash pattern 1, flash pattern 2, flash pattern 3, and you still have the same dynamic of being able to press and hold to change the net set, and be able to turn it off at willing point. I really feel like that would have brought about a whole new dynamic to conjuring, and it would have been like its own style. But the Inova features were never really evergreen to all the other chips. So I'm glad to see that we are trying to implement that in the newer chips now. And I'm just hoping people would want to explore what the timer and the hold feature offer to you, outside of impacting.
And the Spectres can do that. It's just one of those like you gotta really tinker with it. You can do that idea.
Yeah.
And same with I don't know if the keychain idea for the duos can do it to that degree. I think it's more of a literal Inova type where it's like a solid dot, strobe and a blink. But I know with the Spectres, you could literally go down to that nitty gritty.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that we still haven't explored, and I think this is a kind of conversation that is always going to evolve with how the technology evolves. I mean, we already saw by introducing another bulb to the chip or to our lights ourselves, already drastically changes everything to such a degree that it almost makes everything that came before it, rather moot to talk about now, because it's just like, well, this is completely different. But I do think it is important for a lot of newer glovers to understand what we as a community have really built on, and how we came to understand how flash patterns look, how they operate, and how we are able to utilize them within our own move sets as well, and like what flash patterns actually highlight certain concepts and styles out there is really, really important. Yeah, is there any highlight things you guys want to point out about programming theory that you think people should know?
No, I think I've got everything I wanted to share out of the way.
Okay.
Same here. We went through a lot. I mean, there's too much. I feel like there is like some other stuff, but at this point, like it's like minute details.
You can literally really teach like a college level course on everything we talked about. It's that in depth.
Yeah. I will certainly say this is not going to be the only time we talk about programming theory. I feel like this is going to be like the start of a long series of talking about programming theory. So I think where we can leave it off is pretty much just asking the audience, what part of programming theory would you like to hear us discuss further in? Would you actually like us to delve much farther into to flash pattern theory? Do you want us to delve farther into trying to understand or try to have the conversation about dual light chips dynamics and trying to formulate an idea behind that? whatever the case may be, we would definitely like to hear what the audience has to say about that. But if you guys are good, I guess I can go ahead and close off this episode. But yes, I would certainly say thank you to everybody who's came to watch. I know this is a very interesting conversation that kind of feels like it didn't really go anywhere, but I will certainly tell you this is a good start. We will definitely revisit this topic a little bit later down the road and see how things develop. I think with a couple more companies really trying to come out with their own chips as well. I've been hearing things in the work for other companies, so I guess when we see new chips come out, we can talk about those. And of course, if you guys want to follow any of our lovely people that are on here, I will have their socials linked down below. I'm sure you would give everybody a follow. It's always good to see what they're doing, especially when it comes to the world of gloving. And as always, don't hesitate to join the discords between Gloving Academy, Worldwide Flow Oasis, YouGotMoves.com has their own. I think Glow EDs just made theirs public, so there are plenty of places to find more gloving content all around the world. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. I certainly hope you guys enjoyed what we had to say, and we will catch you all next time. Bye.